3 days after my father died, a lawyer handed me a dented metal box and said, "He left everything else to your brother. This is all he wanted you to have." I almost laughed. My brother Daniel got the house, the truck, and what remained in our father's bank account. I got a box that looked like it had been pulled from a flooded basement. That felt like the perfect final message from him. My father and I had barely spoken for 9 years. When I was growing up, he was strict, quiet, and difficult to read. He never asked how I felt. He never said he was proud of me. If I brought home a good grade, he asked why it was not higher. If I made a mistake, he remembered it for months. Daniel had a different relationship with him. They fixed cars together. They watched games every weekend. When Daniel joined my father's construction business, people began calling him the son who stayed loyal. I was the son who left. At least that was how my father described it. I moved away at 19 after a fight that started over college and ended with him telling me not to come back if I walked out. So I walked out. For years, I waited for him to contact me. Then I stopped waiting. My mother tried to keep us connected, but she died 6 years later. After that, the distance between my father and me became permanent. Or so I thought. When the lawyer gave me the box, Daniel would not look at me. He stood near the office window with his arms crossed. I asked if he knew what was inside. He said, "Probably old papers. Dad kept everything." His voice sounded calm, but his jaw was tight. That was the first moment I felt something was wrong. Daniel offered to throw the box in his truck and bring it to my hotel. I refused. I carried it out myself. It was heavier than it looked. Back in my room, I placed it on the bed and stared at it for almost an hour. A small brass lock held it shut. The lawyer had given me a key inside an envelope with my name written across the front. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. Seeing it made my anger return. He had known where I lived. He had known how to reach me. Yet he had chosen silence. I opened the lock. Inside were dozens of envelopes, a stack of photographs, an old wristwatch, and a blue notebook. Every envelope had my name on it. Some also had dates. The oldest was from 9 years earlier, 2 weeks after I left home. My hands started shaking before I even opened it. The letter was short. My father wrote that he had driven to my college but stayed in the parking lot. He had seen me walking into a building with 2 other students. He wanted to speak to me, but he thought I looked happier without him. He wrote that he went home before I noticed him. I read the letter 3 times. Then I opened another. That one was dated 4 months later. He had written about calling me from a payphone near his work site. When I answered, he panicked and hung up. I remembered that call. For years, I assumed it had been a wrong number. There were more letters after that. Some were only a paragraph. Others filled several pages. None had been sent. And the reason they stayed hidden was waiting deeper inside the box. At first, the letters made me angry. Writing was easy. Sending them would have required effort. He had filled pages with words he never had the courage to say, while I spent years thinking I meant nothing to him. Then I found a photograph of my college graduation. My father was standing behind a tree near the edge of the crowd. I had never seen him there. On the back, he had written, "He did it without my help." The next photograph showed the apartment building where I first lived after college. Another showed the restaurant where I worked evenings. There were receipts besides several of the pictures, gas stations, cheap motels, parking garages. My father had been visiting my city for years. He had been watching my life from a distance. That should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt unsettling. Why would a man travel hundreds of miles to see his son and still refuse to knock on his door? Then I opened the blue notebook. The first few pages contained business expenses. After that, the entries changed. My father had started recording every attempt he made to contact me. Called at 8:14, no answer. Wrote another letter, could not send it. Drove past his building, lights were off. Then one entry stopped me. Daniel says Michael does not want contact, says Michael will return everything unopened. I read it again. Daniel had told my father that I wanted nothing to do with him, but my father had never asked me. I turned the page, there were more entries. Gave Daniel the birthday card. Daniel says Michael tore it up. Asked Daniel for Michael's new address. He says Michael moved and will not share it. My chest tightened. I had never received a card. I had never torn up a letter. And I had never asked Daniel to hide my address. The next item in the box made everything worse. It was a printed email from me to Daniel, sent 7 years earlier. I remembered writing it after our mother died. I had asked Daniel if our father would be willing to meet me. I wrote that I did not want another argument. I only wanted one conversation. Daniel's reply at the time had been simple. He said no. He thinks too much damage has been done. But beneath the printed email was a handwritten note from my father. Daniel showed me this today. He says Michael sent it years ago. Why did he keep it from me? The note was dated 8 months before my father's death. That was the real reason Daniel looked nervous in the lawyer's office. He knew what was inside the box. I called him immediately. He did not answer. I called again. Then I sent him a photograph of the notebook entry. He called within seconds. Before I could speak, he said, "You don't understand what it was like here." I asked him one question. "Did you keep us apart?" He stayed silent. That silence gave me the answer. Daniel eventually admitted that he had intercepted letters, cards, and messages for years. At first, he claimed he was protecting both of us. Our father had been difficult after I left. He was angry, embarrassed, and constantly changing his mind about contacting me. Daniel said he thought any meeting would end badly, but that explanation fell apart when I asked about the email. By then, our father wanted to see me. Daniel still hid it. His voice changed when I pushed him. He became defensive. Then the deeper reason came out. Daniel had spent years building his position in the family business. He handled the accounts, managed the workers, and expected to inherit everything. He was scared that if I returned, our father might divide the company between us. So he controlled what each of us knew. He told my father that I hated him. He told me that my father had rejected me. Whenever either of us reached out, Daniel made sure the message went nowhere. I sat on the hotel floor with the phone pressed against my ear, surrounded by letters from a man I had spent 9 years resenting. Daniel kept saying he never expected the separation to last that long. But he made the same choice over and over. That was not one mistake. It was a system. I asked if our father discovered what he had done. Daniel said he found out 8 months before his death. Their relationship collapsed after that. My father removed Daniel from the business accounts and prepared to sell the company. But his health declined before the sale was completed. The house and truck still went to Daniel because the will had not been fully changed. The box, however, had been added through a separate instruction with the lawyer. My father could not repair 9 lost years, so he collected the evidence and left it to me. For the next 2 days, I read every letter. They did not turn him into a perfect father. He was still proud, stubborn, and emotionally distant. Some letters blamed me. Others blamed himself. A few sounded so cold that I had to stop reading. But the later ones were different. He wrote about missing my graduation. He wrote about hearing from my mother that I had received a promotion. He wrote that every year made contacting me harder because he had more silence to explain. His final letter was written 11 days before his death. He said he had allowed pride and fear to make decisions for him. He also said learning what Daniel had done did not remove his own responsibility. He could have called from another phone. He could have driven to my door. He could have sent one letter himself. He knew that. At the bottom, he wrote, "I gave your brother too much control because facing you required more courage than staying away." That sentence broke through every version of him I had carried in my head. I had seen him as a man who felt nothing. The box showed me a man who felt too much and handled all of it badly. I did not speak to Daniel again after that call. The company was sold several months later to cover debts our father had hidden. Daniel received far less than he expected. I did not celebrate. By then, losing money seemed small compared with what he had taken from both of us. I kept the watch, the photographs, and every letter. A year later, I visited my father's old house before Daniel sold it. I stood in the driveway where our final argument had happened. For the first time, I could remember more than his last angry words. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bicycle. I remembered him waiting outside school when my bus was late. I remembered small moments I had buried because anger was easier to carry than grief. The box did not erase what my father did wrong. It gave me something more useful than that. It gave me the missing part of our story. For 9 years, I thought my father had chosen a life without me, but the box showed me that he had spent those same years trying and failing to find his way back.